Hey everybody, I'm Tammy Kiekefer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Desiree Grimaldi. Welcome to Unguarded Minds podcast, where we talk about all the drama, trauma, and gritty things that life throws at us.
And today we have a special guest. This is Becky Petro. She is a juvenile assessment center. She works at the Juvenile Assessment Center. She works as a low risk offender pre-file diversion specialist. And her main goal is to try to reduce the penetration of these kids in the juvenile justice system and hopefully try to reduce recidivism rates. And we're really happy that you're here. So thanks so much, Becky.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Do
So,
you go ahead? Sorry.
sorry, Desiree.
Sorry. So this is our take two. We actually recorded a podcast with you and our whole recording thing got messed up, but we are so happy that you agreed to come back after our first fail.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
So you work in a juvenile detention center. Can you explain to us a little bit about what type of kids you see? Like, why are they coming through there? Because there's so many different things that obviously kids could get in trouble for. So is there a certain area that you guys see majority of the children coming through on?
So actually, I'm not in the detention center. We do screen kids into the detention center if they get in trouble with a violent crime. So I work at the Juvenile Assessment Center, which is a community-based office where we work with law enforcement, we work with the courts, the district attorney's office, schools, everything. Our main goal is when we do assessments with youth, trying to provide resources for the families in order to kind of get them back on track. We take kids with and without charges. So some kids may come in as for instance, a beyond control of parent, or they may be having issues at the school, being out of control. So they'll come to us and hopefully we can complete an assessment to work with them and get them connected to different resources. Kids who do come in with charges, we have different pathways that they'll go. So with my role with being diversion, those kids usually have a list of things they have to do or resources that will provide before the charges actually get filed. And if they complete it, charges never get filed on them. We have other charges where they will get filed on because they reach that level. And then they'll go to court. And then we also have kids where they're going directly into detention, into a detention facility. So we do a lot. It's a lot to explain in one sitting.
What would the typical charges be or what charges do you see more frequently?
It depends. Like, it depends on the day, the moon. So, I mean, we'll get like, assault 3 is a big one. Disorderly conduct, harassment. It's always a rarity. I mean, we do see the homicides. So, I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
But like I said, it depends on the day too. There's also times when we will see a slew of like an assault 3 with domestic violence or harassment with a domestic violence. And domestic violence, I should note, since we are talking about teens and domestic, relationships and that type of thing, domestic violence is only an enhancer, meaning that that teen is definitely going to court so they can get a protection order. There will be a protection order put in place to their victims. So that's, yeah.
And how do they determine? First, I was going to ask you to define assault 3. And then also, how do they determine domestic violence? Because they're not, a lot of times you're right. People think, oh, you're in a relationship, you live together, you're married, whatever. Yeah.
It is any type of intimate relationship that they may have. So you have a boyfriend and a girlfriend and they break up. An assault 3 can be anywhere from, pushing someone and that the other person not reacting back to punching them multiple times, without any serious bodily injury. So it really depends on the scale. and what the investigative officer finds for that. So
And so like you said, if someone punches and the other person doesn't punch back, that's tough. Like as a parent, you want to teach your kids to take care of themselves, defend themselves. At what point does that become backfiring for parents?
well, all the time, because because most of the kids that I see on my caseload, and it's typically at schools where they get in a fight, and it's called disorderly conduct, because you may have, and what's really sad is you may have a kid who's been bullied a lot by a certain group of kids, and he or she finally just has enough, and they retaliate, they fight back. And at that point, then both parties are in trouble because they can't determine who started. So parents are always really upset saying, well, my kid's been bullied by this one. And I'm like, I feel for you. I understand. But anytime they retaliate and hit back, that automatically can sound, that automatically goes to a disorderly conduct.
Mm.
So, yeah,
So frustrating.
very
Especially
frustrating.
when parents have been adamant about, hey, this is happening. Here's an instance. Here's another example. I'm calling it in again. Are you guys going to do anything? And then all of a sudden the victim is in trouble. Yeah, it's maddening.
It is maddening, and it's, I feel so bad, and it's like there's only so many times you can tell your kid, go to an adult, go to an adult. And I mean, even when they come in to see me and I'm just like, I am so sorry. Like, um, but oftentimes, like I said, with my program, it is the first time that they've done it. And usually it's the last time. They have to take a class, they do community service, they write an essay, however that may look, but typically they're in and out of my program within 60 days, and then it never happens again. So either that person that had been bullying him stops bullying him, because they're both in trouble, or I don't know, yeah,
Like,
it's a lot, it is a lot, it's a lot for parents. So
yeah.
I tell my kids handle it and then we'll deal with the consequences later.
you know what, a lot of parents do, and I've had some parents say, I'm not even mad about this.
Uh-huh.
And I look at them and I say, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Totally understand. So let's just make this as quick and painless as possible. Your record will be expunged once you're done. Meaning that when, let's say, they get pulled over for something, or they get in trouble for something later on down the road, and somebody's looking on like the Colorado courts, that charge isn't going to show up because they have actually completed it. So
Mhm.
Well, there's a balance with it. I mean, if you continue to be a target in a punching bag because you're not standing up for yourself, I mean, it's just going to get worse, because that's what bully behavior is all about, is feeling in control and power over. So I think, yeah, I mean, there's that fine balance of like, when's enough and what are you going to do to stand up for yourself,
yeah.
and then getting in trouble. So, I mean, I think there's lessons all over the place for that, but yeah.
There are, and that's why, thank goodness, my program exists, and
Yeah.
the fact that we are able to divert these kids into different programs. Now, if they continue, if these assaultive behaviors continue, disorderly conduct, that type of thing, and we're starting to see like 3 and 4, like more of them, then there's a history, then there's something else that needs to be done. And so usually by the second or third one, I should say, we're getting different type of resources in. So it may be counseling, therapy, it just depends on what the needs are of the kid and the family at the time.
Mhm.
Do all states have programs like you offer, do you know of, or is that something particularly funded through Colorado?
No, I think most states will have that. There's so much, especially with the new legislation that has come out. This Family First initiative that started, and it's pretty much across the United States, especially with youth. They have proven that youth do better at home, as long as the home life is okay. So that's a whole nother issue. But youth do better at home than they do being put into a facility. So lower level lower level offenses need lower level resources and interventions. When you put a low level kid into a high level intervention, all you're doing is creating a high level kid.
Hmm.
So it's not that scared straight thing that a lot of parents want anymore. They have proven that to not actually work. So that we still get a lot of calls. Can you please, scare my kids straight when they come in there? No, we can't, because there's a reason for their behavior. And it's our job to find out what that reason is and hopefully get them set up with the services that you need, your family needs, that type of thing.
I mean, I've thought about that about prisons. I'm like, all they're doing is going in there and figuring out how to get away with it and be better criminals. It's like a school.
Yeah.
No, it is. Even some of the classes. So I'll recommend, I have kids, I'll assign them different classes that they have to take. And these classes used to be in person. Even my own daughter had to take a minor in possession class because she got caught with alcohol on her graduation party when she was 18. And she's like, Mom, I go to the class. It's like I could have been set up with any drug dealer like there, because it was an in-person class. And all it was just a complete place for you to get hooked up, with whatever drugs, alcohol, whatever you wanted. My kids that are on my caseload, it is online, period. And it is, one-on-one, like they're basically just doing it self-paced. There are some that are virtual, but you're not actually meeting these people. You're not learning new things. You're learning hopefully what you should be learning through the classroom.
Yeah.
And I was, originally, well, we were talking about consequence management, basically, like, if you do this, you're going to get in trouble. Here's your punishment. Here's what you have to do. And then, you brought up the fact of like, we want to figure out why this stuff is happening in the first place. And I was going to ask you how mental health services, if they're incorporated in there, or how you guys manage where's this behavior coming from? Because we got to prevent it instead of just react to it.
Exactly. And so when the youth come in and we do an assessment, we have different tools that we use. So we'll sit and talk with them, but we also have one assessment that's called the Maisie 2, which looks at it's a very brief mental health assessment looking at suicide ideation, homicidal ideation. It will look at your anger issues, depression, somatic disorders, so anxiety type of things. So we get answers from that. We also look at trauma. We have separate trauma tools if a kid's like screened in for trauma, for the trauma assessment. We have drug, alcohol, assessments, and we do these on every kid that come in. So when a youth comes in, I mean, that's just part of the paperwork. And then, like I said, with the trauma part, like doing a trauma tool, it's only if they score a certain level on the Maisie for trauma screening. And that one goes a little bit further. We don't necessarily ask the questions of that trauma, but we then can resource out to trauma specific therapists. Sometimes the kids are willing to talk about it, sometimes they're not. And same with the parents. So when they have talked about it, I mean, obviously we also work really close with Division of Human Services as well. So we're all mandatory reporters. But if a youth comes to us and they're reporting something new, like rape, or if they've been sexually assaulted by a parent's significant other or a family member, and it's all new, we kind of stop the assessment at that point and call law enforcement in. If it's new, that way we're not having to testify in court, which is always fun, let me tell you, because it's happened. But at least even with it being at our facility, if we call law enforcement, at least the family's not having to worry about the cops showing up at their house. They're taking that report at our house, at our place of business.
Your second.
And then our second, yeah, it is really, honestly. And then there's also at that point in time, the youth may have to do forensic interviews and stuff like that. So, I mean, we're kind of that base of where things get started, and we just kind of, resource out and stuff. and we do that with parents too. So we've worked with parents who are, going through a domestic violence situation in the home, or parents who may be homeless. We have just a lot. We deal with high risk victim youth, which are kids that are being sex trafficked. So there's a lot. Like I said, once again, from the beginning, there's just so much that we do. It's really hard to kind of pinpoint, one thing. And every story is different. We never get the same case in
Right.
ever.
And are you guys like overloaded? Do you have, because like you think about child servicing like that, and you hear the stories on how there's just so many cases and so much going on that you can't necessarily get to every single one, or you miss things or anything like that. Are you guys able to manage the caseload that you have coming in? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean, is it overbearing how much is coming in versus what you guys staff are?
Not for us, because we're resourcing out. And it's mainly like sometimes when we're resourcing out to our main therapeutic provider, they may have a wait list of 6 months. So that is where it gets hard. And it's typically during the school year where we find our resources, which the resources have also dwindled since COVID. And I hate using that as an excuse, but a lot of resources, companies lost their right to, their businesses basically, because so much was going on during that time. And just having youth facilities where a parent needs respite care, or we need to get a youth in there to put them on a 72-hour hold, or whatever that may look like. A lot of those places are overrun. We aren't. We sometimes have that stigma of, if the kid is going there, they're going there because of charges, or the parents are too embarrassed to reach out for help, and, oh nope, our family's fine, we don't need anything. Or if we get a first time kid and then we give resources, and we call back to double check and just follow up, and they're like, no, they've been great ever since they went to you. And I'm like, okay, honeymoon period, like that problem didn't just go away. So there's a lot of follow up, and a lot of families that it's just work, and they don't want to always put that work in.
Okay.
So
So you had talked earlier before we started recording, just about, shifting gears a little bit into kids who aren't quite in the system, kids are kids, are going to do crazy stuff. But prom is coming up for a lot of high schoolers, and graduation, and just even that transition after high school into whatever stage is next, whether they're moving out or going to college, or like, what kinds of things do you have for parents, or just around all these events coming up for families?
um So, I mean, there's a lot of different things to look at. One of the things that we were talking about was not just teen violence, but dating,
Yes.
around dating. So if we want to look at that from that situation,
Yep.
we can go off in different directions. I mean, the biggest thing that parents need to look for, honestly, is the drug use, the alcohol, the drinking, the this and that, and just knowing that having some support in place for the kids, or just saying, hey, call me if you've been doing this. But another thing that some parents don't realize is that dating piece. Right now everyone's trying to find that date. They're trying to, ask somebody out, or do whatever they can do. And sometimes what happens is the kids get so excited about so and so asking them to prom, and they don't really take a look at how that person may be treating them. So if we start talking about issues relating to dating, and I don't always want to say the word violence, but dating, like, there's emotional issues that may come up, there's physical issues that may come up. Talk about, okay, if you guys are going to go to prom together and you're staying, through the night with each other, if you're not ready to have sex, don't have sex. If you are, make sure you're protected. And being with that person that you want to be with. Like, don't feel obligated to have sex with them, or there's all kinds of issues. So which direction do you want to go in? And then we can kind of go there.
I think, I think along those paths of knowing, I guess, boundaries, boundaries, how people get into those situations in the first place as kids, as teenagers, not knowing how, I mean, you know what you don't want, or you know what you want based on what you don't want. And at this stage of the game, they probably haven't dated a whole lot. And so you're
Right.
like, just that, oh, pick me, or say yes to me, say yes to me. There's so much of that reassurance that I'm attractive, I'm wanted, so they might lower their own expectations or don't even have boundaries. Yeah, I think just like that whole dating aspect, it's not maybe violence, but there could be intimidation, there could be
Manipulation.
that's the word, manipulation.
Yeah, that just came to my head.
Exactly.
Well, and then
So
you add all of that to alcohol and drugs.
absolutely.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
then you throw a naive parent in there. So you
Yeah.
just have room for nothing but disaster.
Well, and let's talk about that. So if we look at the lineage that these kids are going through, like let's start with elementary school, junior high. And this is something we talked about last time too. Little Johnny is hitting you. Oh, little Johnny just likes you. That's why he's doing that. And we're giving that wrong message already when they're younger, as opposed to little Johnny needs therapy. He should not be hitting you. No one should be touching you that way. Um, and really putting that boundaries around the body. No one should speak to you that way. No one should touch you that way. But we don't always as parents do that. We also as parents don't always show that either, because what kids see in the home they think is normal. So if they are witnessing domestic violence, if they are witnessing that manipulation piece, that is a norm to them, even though it's not right and it may not feel right. So when they start dating, you only know what you have seen and what you have experienced. So going out on that first date and, all of a sudden, or going out and you're dating someone and you're so excited because you're going to prom. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, I don't like that group of friends you hang out with, so I don't want you talking to them anymore.
Mm.
Or I don't, you spend too much time with your family. Let's do this. And we've all had that one friend who's gotten like completely obsessed with the guy they're dating or a girl they're dating or however that may be. And all of a sudden the friends are kind of that last resort. They're put on the back burner. Um, and then it's all encompassing. And so when things are going wrong in that relationship and they're not feeling right, they don't feel like they have anyone to turn to. Or if they do turn to them, like a friend, and they say, so and so, he kind of abused me the other night. And then the girl's like, oh, I can't believe you let him do that. And then all of a sudden they're back together again. And now she's mad at the friend for telling her to break up.
Mm.
I know that's kind of a lot that I said in a roundabout circle, but
No, but
there's
that
so
makes
many different, there's so many different things. So it's really teaching our kids those boundaries. And I am just as at fault, I have grown children now and we don't know what I don't, that was so long ago, when I was dating, but you can still remember some of those, your first love, where they could do no wrong and you loved everything about them, and you would see red flags, but you never quite paid attention to it until it was too late. And now you have lost all of your self-esteem, all of your self-worth, because they have like put you down, or they've um made comments about, you shouldn't wear that, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And then pretty soon you're just kind of lost, and you get out of the relationship and your friends have all turned against you because you've made him everything or her everything. So yeah, there's so much to it in that teenage world, and really trying to just check in with our kids and just say, hey, just want to make sure, and putting those boundaries out. However, we do have a lot of kids also being raised by grandparents these days. Um, so that's a whole nother ball game too. So, which is a lot of kids that we see. So a lot of family trauma that's already gone on. So there's a lot right there.
That's a
Wow.
lot to unpack. There's so much in there. Desiree,
Yeah.
you say something.
Well, two parts of it, and one of them it's very judgmental, and I apologize in advance, but I had a family member who passed away, went down the wrong path every way that she could, passed away, and then her mother got custody of her daughter, and I was like, the parent who failed the first one, you just now took and gave them another one to fail. Like, why? A lot of that, I mean, and again, these people are adults at some point, and no matter how we raise our kids, they could turn out different ways. But this particular person, there were so many patterns. There wasn't only one kid that chose a different route. And it was like, when are you going to realize you're the problem and why these kids are turning that way? But the second part of that too is even people understanding, based on what you had just said, the person you're dating, that escalates. And it escalates so quiet but fast that as a parent, I feel like you have to be your child's frontal lobe to an extent, because they don't see the other side of that. They don't have the capacity to see that consequence. It's something I practice with my teenage daughter, where she tells me everything. Some things I'm like, I would have never found out. I would have never known. You didn't have to tell me that. But she does.
It's okay though. You actually really want that. So
yeah. But I mean, about her friends and stuff, and it gives me the opportunity to go, okay, I'm mom. I know nothing ever, but just listen for 2 weeks. This is going to happen and this is going to happen, and watch how that plays out. And she'll come back to me in 3 weeks and she's like, everything you said, it worked that way. Like her friends having sex. And I'm like, oh, everybody's going to know. She's going to get labeled, a certain way. And she's like, no, they promised they wouldn't tell anybody. I was like, he's already told everybody.
Exactly.
He knows.
Yeah.
I was like, and they're going to break up, and his friend's going to want to date her, and he's going to be better than his friend. Like, it's a whole thing. And sure enough, I mean, it wasn't even 3 weeks. And she's like, everything you said happened. I was like, I know.
Yeah. They're teenagers. They can't keep their mouths shut.
Yeah.
They just can't. I mean, like you said, the whole frontal lobe, that cause and effect thinking just isn't developed. And as parents, I mean, we have to give our kids the room to discover that cause and effect, but we also have to show them, or like you said, in words, going, just watch, and this A, B, and C is going to happen. And then they start to see it. And that is the one way that those, neurotransmitters start to form, and that frontal lobe starts to kind of like, oh, okay, I get this now. But it's just all learning. And what are we putting into our computer chip in our brain? Because that's really what it is. So, yeah.
I think pushing those critical thinking skills too, because I feel like the youth is really lacking in that department, because they have the phones and they have the computer, like, to make them stop and put things in sequential order of like, that happened, that's a cause, that's the effect, that's the action, that's the reaction, and making them actually break it down and see it from a different perspective.
No, that's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely.
On the phone, they're like, oh, that just happened. It just happened. It was so quick. It just, and it's like, no, there's steps.
Yeah.
It was just
Yes.
squished into a 30-second clip.
Exactly. Or, the end of the relationship going, I didn't see that happen. I don't know why I feel this way. And yet everyone could see the writing on the wall and the red flags, bing, 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 bing. And then the kid's like, I just never understood it. I never saw it, and even as adults, we do that too. So, our trauma, even as adults, really set forth what we pass down to our kids. So it's also taking care of our stuff too. And what we do for them, and how we set those boundaries. And I think, not making that mistake of showing them what boundaries are. But then you're also going to have the same kids. You can't tell me what to do. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just showing you. And no matter what you do or say, they're not going to take it. So
I like
they have to learn.
Piggybacking on that. I like earlier how you were talking about, it doesn't just start out with, I don't know, punching someone in the face. I mean, and I'm talking about dating. There's so many little micro aggression type behaviors that come into play, like you're spending too much time with your family. Why don't you want to be with me more? And kind of the isolating part. And are you really going to
Mhm.
wear that? Because you don't really look so, just that breaking down of the internal confidence, internal sense of self. And I'm
Mhm.
glad that you brought that up because I think a lot of times those get so overlooked. It's so easy to rationalize and justify those types of microaggression behaviors and to be able to explain to kids like how'd that make you feel when he or she said that to you? How does that make you feel to not be talking to your kids anymore? How does or your friends anymore? How, just kind of getting that conversation going. But I like how you brought that up because that's so true. It's where it starts. It doesn't
Yeah.
just start with physical abuse.
And how much of that for kids is normal? Like how many parents do that to their kids? And
Mm,
so we always seem to veer to what is normal for us. So if you are a kid who has come up in a chaotic family where there's a lot of abuse and a lot of fighting and a lot of yelling, screaming, however that may look, manipulation, you look at the abuse cycle like with your mom and you see that, but then you fall into that same pattern because chaos is what is natural and that's what feels normal. And anything outside of that feels scary. And
mhm,
we don't know how to accept that. Um, so it is easy, and it's almost like those predators kind of find it, like, oh, this is the one I can manipulate and do all of that. So really teaching those boundaries is just so important, but we have to know that we've got to learn them ourselves as parents too.
yep.
So, and it's interesting, when some of the kids that we see, when we talk about like some of these minor things, and this is why this has come into play with law enforcement. So you have a couple who breaks up. They went to prom, he dumps you the next day, you're pissed off, and you go TP his house. You get caught on the ring camera, parents call the cops, you're getting a ticket for it. You're getting a ticket for harassment with domestic violence. You're going to court, you're going in front of a judge, and there will be a protection order that is put in place, typically if the family wants that protection order, because, oh, we got to protect our kid, because if she's coming after him because they broke up, what else is she going to do? And so it starts small. Luckily, our court system got better, where these kids aren't going into detention for something minute like TPing a house. Um, Domestic violence, because domestic violence always used to go directly to jail, period. Didn't matter what it was. And now it doesn't. So now they'll have like a next day court hearing, but they get to go home. They don't have to go into jail. And so really it's kind of that first step in, unfortunately, with the law stepping in saying you can't get revenge because they broke up with you, or you can't get revenge because you want that person back, or however that may look. Um, you just basically have to take your lumps and move on and not kind of progress it in any other way.
And I'm sure that blindsides a lot of people because when you think of domestic violence, you think of violence. And
Right.
TPing somebody's house is not violent. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
I'm sure that a lot of kids get blindsided with what ultimately was a stunt, getting charged with domestic violence. That's insane.
Uh-huh.
Oh, it is. And, I did work in youth corrections, and a long time ago. And before that law changed, when they were seeing, so what they were seeing is like that harassment piece, for example, starting out with TPing, maybe doing something else, maybe calling on the phone, that whole stalking piece. Um, and there wasn't really anything being done. They weren't marking it with that domestic violence. Well, that can amp up too. And so what are you going to do? You've got to stop it right there at the core.
Yeah.
And that's really where that kind of came from. But when you were throwing kids in jail for cupcaking your ex-boyfriend's car, and you go to jail because you put icing on their car, there's a problem,
Yeah.
because once again, you're putting that low level kid into an extremely high risk situation. So they got smart with that. But they do look at things like if it is a violent, if it's an assault 3, if it's something assault 2, if it's strangulation, something like, yeah, you're going to jail, period. It doesn't matter. But,
Right.
and even with that assault 3, sometimes with the harassment, that will go, that'll go in. It just depends on the affidavit that the officer writes and a lot. So there's things that are tied to it. But I mean, I've known parents who have had domestic charges brought up against them because a parent, I think, got in an argument with her husband and she threw mashed potatoes at him. And she literally, somebody called the cops because they heard yelling, and she got arrested for domestic violence for throwing mashed potatoes at her husband.
Yeah.
And we're sitting here going, why are we junking up our juvenile system or our judicial system with these types of things? So that's where a lot of other programs have come through. So we're not like kind of junking it up with things that are very minimal. So we can deal with the things that are bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys ever get people in, I would assume on the relationship side of like sexting or sending out pictures of an ex or anything like that to like whole schools, but what about the bullying side of it as well? If I guess if that picture originated with an ex, but they're not the ones who sent, you know what I mean? Like, do you guys
So
get that mess as well?
in a roundabout way, it actually goes, we have a DA that deals primarily, she works with the sex offenders, and we have an investigator that does the sexting. Part of the reason that it doesn't just come through us, I mean, we'll do, if it's like a sheriff's department thing, we do book throughs and mugshots for that, and that's about it. We have to be careful because we take kids from ages 10 to 17. So if you have someone who is in there that is being charged with sexting or any other kind of indecent exposure or other types, you kind of don't want these kids mixed together. So they actually go to a separate DA. And we don't deal with that. They have their own way of dealing things. They've got therapists, they've got a whole entire program that is just for those that have sexual charges in nature. So
They would just add the DB enhancement on their end.
if it was something like that, if it warranted that, yes. Depending on what the actual charge was, they could go into detention, but they still would end up with that same person that is designated just
Gotcha.
for those sexual
Nature
behaviors.
charges. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when coming up with prom, just kind of circling back, I mean, you're potentially going to see kids who are drinking and driving.
Yes. Or now it's marijuana too. I mean, marijuana and driving is still not
So
safe
driving
either.
under
So
the influence of something.
there we go. Yes.
Potentially some domestic violence. I'm
Potentially,
sure
yeah.
a lot of jealousy happens
Oh,
when
yeah.
you put that many people together. Um,
Yep.
just potential sexual assault.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my favorite one is if you didn't dress that way, no one would have, you wouldn't have gotten touched or you wouldn't have gotten attacked. And God, that drives me nuts. It's like,
Same.
you know what I mean? So it's all of those things. Yeah, you're right. I mean, Desiree, you're right. Like you have so many things coming up. And so as a parent, it's really good to know your kids' friends, to know their families. And a lot of us that were fortunate to grow up in the area that we have with our kids that have gone through elementary and junior high and high school together and have been involved, it's nice to know those families. And some people don't have that. Some parents don't have the time. They may work too much. They have no clue. Get to know them. I mean, make sure you have like the boyfriend's parents number or the girlfriend's parents number or their number. Come up with a plan. Let your child know, like if they're in a situation that they're not feeling safe, they're always more than welcome to call you. Maybe they have to send a text with a code word or something like that. Or if they're not feeling that comfortable with the parents, have it with the best friend. Or we need kids to know that they are protected one way or another. And they're not going to get punished for reaching out to us as parents. I mean, if you think about something like prom, yes, you can imagine, not that we always want it, but you can imagine there's going to be drugs around, there's going to be alcohol around. It's been around since prom has been around. And so if they do these things, yeah, you can talk about it in the morning, but right now what I'm worried about more is your safety. So Tammy, how about you?
I think something that's frequent in my private practice when I'm working with people more and more and more, which is terrifying, is the false accusation, where someone is saying, um, she raped me or he raped me, and it was consensual or nothing ever happened. Or I mean, when you're saying like, call me, there's a safe word, I'm here for you, we'll talk about it in the morning. I think that there's another aspect also of teaching our kids to be aware of your surroundings and do what you need to do to protect yourself so that you are not setting yourself up for these false accusations.
Yes.
And I'm all about the Me Too movement. I am all about it. I think that, women, myself, we've experienced all kinds of shit that we shouldn't have experienced. And it was just okay, or it was keep it to yourself or whatever. I think that there's kind of a flip side of it where people are being falsely accused for revenge. um I want to get back at my ex, so I'm going to create this story. I want my ex back, so I'm going to create this story that you did this to me, and then they'll come back to me.
Mhm.
I don't know, I mean,
I
just
want my parents to get mad when they find out.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it gives me chills just even talking about it, because it's horrible.
That was a big issue with statutory rape for a long time. Like statutory rape for what it was meant to be, a minor and somebody a decent amount older than them, but then it became two minors, but still a small gap, and parents would have the right, even though both kids were like, we willingly did it. Like we chose
Mhm.
to, and the parents can literally destroy kids' lives because they're mad or they're disappointed in their own kid for consenting.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my gosh, those cases are the worst. I've seen them just ruin lives.
Yeah.
And I don't think kids understand, teens, people, adults, anybody. I don't think they understand that when you start those false accusations, it just snowballs. It snowballs and it snowballs and and it grows so big. And then when people actually find out the truth behind it, if they ever do, you're blacklisted. Like no one wants anything to do with you. But what do you do in the meantime as a person? And typically we know that this normally happens with males, and females falsely accusing them of, well, I didn't want to have sex and he made me do it. um so you have the false accusations, and then you have the other of, I didn't want to have sex, I said no, and he still did it. So where is that? We need what is truthful, and having Desiree, like you were saying with your kids, and I was that way with mine, and I know Tammy is too. Having that relationship with your kids where they know they can talk to you about anything. And hey, if you're having sex, okay, let's make sure you're being safe about it.
Yeah.
Like, let's take
Yeah.
these actions. And the parent who's absolutely not, well, the kid's going to do it anyway, and then the parent finds out, well, he made me do it, he raped me. you know but then you've got to look at the kids' trauma. I mean, I've had a lot of kids where I had one situation where the boyfriend would not participate or wanted to stop, but the girl had been sexually traumatized so often that she thought, what was wrong with me? What's wrong with me that you don't want to have sex with me? And so then made up a big lie. And it happens. That happens too. So
It's I think I try to talk to, my own kids and also kids who I work with. Just be aware of your surroundings. I don't care if you have to, have a recorded conversation. Are you good? Am I good? Are we good? I mean, I know it sounds so crazy and silly and stupid, but I mean, that could take something. I mean, one, if you've got to do this in the first place, maybe you should think twice about having sex with someone. But as
Red flag. Yeah.
so, I mean, there's that. But yeah, I mean, asking consent over and over. Are you sure? Is this all right? Are you cool with it? I want to make sure. Just triple checking. It just, I know it sounds unrealistic, especially when
Yeah.
you throw a little drugs and alcohol in there and you're off to the races. But I don't know. I mean, I talk to the people who I work with and my own kids about look at the long-term effect. Is a quick conversation worth it? Or would you rather go through a lifetime or huge consequences for something happening to you and now it's your word against hers? Like what
Yeah.
you have to stand on. Yeah.
It typically happens at parties, when with that type of a situation, and like you said, drugs and alcohol involved, and one of the parties wakes up and says, "What happened?" And, "Oh, I think you raped me." Like, so really making sure that your date or whoever you're with is coherent, is kind of a big deal too, because there's other things that can happen with that. Well, I was a little drunk. I didn't really consent to this. So like you said, having those conversations and those expectations, it's really important, especially if it's someone you really haven't been seeing for a long time. It's just a prom date. It's not like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or person that you've been dating for a year or whatever. So,
Yeah. And I think maybe it goes back to that internal sense of confidence to be able to say, I'm out of here, like
mhm,
I said I'm not interested, and now I'm calling my friend or my parent or just that internal sense of confidence where you're recognizing all of those red flags instead of blowing right through them. And yeah, I think that this is that time where it's like it's never too late to have a conversation with your kids, and you're always prepping them for confidence and self-respect and being able to be assertive and all of those things, I guess, are helpful to prevent a situation like that.
they
Well, I
are.
think
And
like what Becky said too, though, is to get all the things that you just mentioned, Tammy, they have to feel like they have a safe place to fall back on, to
Yeah.
have the confidence to say no, to have the confidence to get out of a really bad situation. Even if parents have to put their pride aside and be like, you know what, call me, no questions asked. And you might just have to eat that one. And as a parent, just be there to protect them and
Mhm.
not give a shit about what they did to get there necessarily, and just get them home safe. I mean, that's ultimately
yeah,
the goal. If you
Mhm.
want
yeah.
to yell at them more than wake up to them being alive in their bed tomorrow morning, well, you're the problem. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. Oh my gosh. Yes, that's a lot of problem too. And it happens a lot. So,
And I
yeah,
think
I mean,
parents, they want to sometimes they want to start parenting when the kid is like 12 or 13 or 14. I mean, this level of trust to have this open communication starts a long time ago. And
mhm,
I think that, although it's never too late to have the conversation, you have to work really, really hard the older your kids get to build that trust, to build that open communication.
right. You do. And far too often as kids, especially children of trauma, um, a part of their brain blames the parent. Like if that child has been sexually abused and it was by mom's boyfriend, for example, there may be a lot of hatred towards mom. Mom never kept me safe. Even if mom didn't know about it, mom didn't keep me safe, because that is just where our brain is going to go as a trauma victim. Um, when we were growing up, it was the quiet, you don't do, just shush, shush, shush. This is all very quiet. We don't talk about matters with anybody else. And a lot of that has, some of that stemming still kind of affects kids. But I think this day and age, I'm hoping that we can be more open, into talking and dealing with those things, because family secrets anymore, they destroy families. They don't keep them together. They destroy lives, when they're secrets
Yeah.
in trauma. So,
So I would love your opinion on something around that. So the kids that do grow up that way and their parents keep things in the house, keep secrets, maybe they're being sexually abused by somebody who is threatening to harm them or their family if they tell anybody. They're now going to look for an adult that they can trust, but can ultimately be another predator.
So what
So
most of our
how
high
would a child navigate that? Because you think, I mean, it could be people in your school and you're supposed to trust them, but they're just looking for that opportunity, that vulnerable kid. So how
Yeah.
does a child navigate a safe adult?
First off, hopefully they're going to school, because a lot of times those kids usually start ditching, they stop showing up. And so that's one of the things that we look at, is that isolation piece, the lack of going to school. Maybe they're running away. When we start looking at some of these kids that we get that are high risk victims, and I say that that's a mark for sex trafficking. I mean, we see them as young as 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old. They're just trying to get out of the house, and to find someone safe. And that someone safe that they normally find is a predator, like Tammy was saying, who's normally in their 20s, and they start trafficking these kids, but they love them, or they make them feel safe. And that is something that the kid has never felt. So I totally lost your question.
How does a
But
kid
hopefully
navigate
if
finding a
they
safe
are,
adult?
yeah, usually, and we have to look at it, school should be their safe place. School should ultimately be their safe place. But if it's not, so when they come to our facility, when they come to the Jack, um, we are those safe people, and we kind of build that rapport with those kids when we do the assessments, and we get them set up with therapists. It's hopefully the family that is following through. We make those reports. Hopefully DHS gets involved. I mean, there's a lot that we try to do to get them set up with a safe person. Mentorships. We've gotten kids set up with Big Sister, Big Brother before. So just really trying to find mentors for these kids that are, kind of lost because they don't have that family life they can feel safe at. And we're hoping, I mean, school is that safe place for them. But if it is a kid who is acting out at school because obviously there's issues going on at home, hopefully they have a safe person at school, because that also gets turned off too by some people who work in the schools. They're just like, oh, that kid's nuts, I'm not dealing with him. So that sounds really discouraging. I'm sorry, but that's kind of the
No, well, I was just thinking, like, if teens hear this and they listen to the prom part and all that stuff, like if they don't have a safe person in mind that they can, like, what are options for them? Because they might not come into your office. Like, what are things that they can do to become safe, get safe, be protected, because
yeah. Um, if they feel like they're being threatened, obviously calling law enforcement, but a lot of teens aren't going to want to do that. But let's say it's to that situation. Law enforcement is very good about having a victim advocate, or if you can call a victim advocate online, like online, you can find their phone numbers or whatever, and you can just go straight to a victim's advocate. Let's say you do have a boyfriend that is or somebody that you have broken up with and they won't leave you alone, and they're stalking, but their behaviors haven't hit the point to where you want to call law enforcement, or you're afraid of repercussion with that. Call a victim's advocate. If there is something that needs to be done, many times they'll go with you. If there's something you need to do, because I think that is one of the biggest things people are afraid of, is if I call and turn this person in, all that's going to do is piss them off.
Yeah.
So you need to navigate that obviously cautiously. And so I would call that a victim's advocate. That's what they're there for.
Mhm.
And so I think they would just look at whatever county they live in, and it's based on
Mhm.
county. So you could look up who's my victim advocate for the county that I live in.
Correct. And like if you're in Lakewood's police department has their own victims advocacy. Every city has their own, every municipality will have a victims advocate within their judicial system area. And that doesn't necessarily mean, just because you're calling a victims advocate, that does not mean that person is going to be in trouble law enforcement wise. Like, it
Okay.
does not mean that. It means they're there to help you. So that's also important too. If you're in unincorporated Jefferson County, for instance, let's say you live in Lakewood, but it's that unincorporated piece, like I don't know, but it's all, we have those little areas where Jeffco Sheriff actually takes over. The sheriff's department has a wonderful victims advocate. So there's places that you can call for
And I
that.
think
For adults and children.
Adults and children. And actually, to tell you, well, just on the subject of adults, and kids can actually utilize this and let their parents know if they're ever in that domestic violence situation where they're seeing one of their parents go through it. Porch Light is a nonprofit that is very close. That place is fabulous. It's for anybody dealing with domestic violence. They
that's
are there.
Colorado only.
Huh?
Is that only in Colorado, or is that
It's only in Colorado. It's only Jefferson County is what we have. Each
Okay.
county has their own. So Porch Light is it's actually in Lakewood, but they have lawyers, victim advocates. They've got people to help you find housing. They've therapists. I mean, Porch Light is one of probably the best things that ever happened to all of this, and I've set many families up with that before, where the kid will actually say, you know, my mom is experiencing this, or the parent will say it, and it is all anonymous. Like the family can just walk in and they get taken care of. If there's reports that need to be made, they'll call law enforcement in there, kind of like what we would do for kids. So it's huge. So actually, Tammy, that'd be a really good place for you to go, just kind of drop in and do a visit and just
Yeah.
see what they offer, because it's amazing what they do.
And we could put Porch Lights information in our as a
Description.
thanks. And
Yeah,
and then people, if you're outside of Colorado or you know, Denver County, whatever, call them. They probably have resources like, oh, you're in this state, call this place, you know, so that would be a good.
yeah.
So victim advocate, they're safe to talk. I don't know how many people use
Safe to
that.
tell.
Safe
You
to
know,
tell.
safe to tell gets a lot because
Yeah.
we work with Jeffco schools. So if there's a threat or anything that comes through, a lot of times we're the ones doing it. We'll do the assessment if the school deems it necessary that we get involved with that. So
And I think you're just encouraging, you have to tell somebody, you know,
right.
if you keep it to yourself because you're afraid, that's a lot to deal with. I mean, life is tough to deal with by yourself anyways.
Mhm.
Add this kind of stuff on there and to feel like you've got to process this and keep it to yourself. I think you're just encouraging, talk to a friend, maybe talk to a friend's parent, talk to,
Absolutely.
yeah,
A coach, you know, any safe adult that you have. Um, you know, for kids, one of the most important things that we look at during assessments too, or when we're working with kids, is those pro-social activities. So speaking about a coach, or, you know, if you're in choir or whatever it is, like those activities, first off, keep you out of trouble, because you know that's your why. That's why you do well in school, or you try to do well in school. That may be why you don't do drugs, or you know that could be your one source of something you're good at. So pro-social activities are extremely important, and Desiree, your kids are never going to get in trouble because they are always busy. um so I mean there's a lot to it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Free time equals trouble.
We-
You're not allowed to sit idle.
well, it does, but we don't want to burn our kids out too, and that's a
They have
whole
the
nother
weekend,
subject.
just like everybody else.
But I'm just saying that is a whole nother subject of burnout for some kids too. So that's a whole nother podcast.
Well, this has been information packed for sure. I think takeaways are communication, knowing, you know, building that internal sense of self, having a support system, um, standing up for yourself, being assertive. Yeah, recognizing who you are, what you want, knowing your red flags. I mean, all of that stuff.
And it takes work. That takes work. It is not something most people are even born with. As you know, trauma starts in the womb. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've got a ton of work cut out for you, and we appreciate everything that you're doing out there. And
Thank you.
then put these resources in there. Are there any other resources that we could tie in that could be helpful?
You can definitely put our resource in the Juvenile Assessment Center, Jefferson County Juvenile Assessment Center, because that's where we really connect a lot of people too. We also go through JCMH, which is actually JC for mental health, Jefferson Center for Mental Health. Well Power is another one that is actually connecting with JCMH. So, but if you put us down, I mean, we have a lot of different ones that we're working with now. And we're always looking for more resources. So if somebody out there sees this and they're like, oh my gosh, I could be a mentor, or I have a mentoring business. There's one that we deal with, like Girls Inc. So we'll send, for mentorship for girls, and big brother, big sister. So there's things we can do. Definitely put the Jefferson or Juvenile Assessment Center down. And we can always link people to those, or give us a call too. So, and I
Yeah.
can send you that information.
Okay. Awesome.
So yeah,
Well, thank you for doing take 2 with us.
absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And make sure that you like and subscribe and share. All right. Talk to you next week.